Before we begin today's story, imagine this. A galaxy-spanning council laughing at humanity, thinking we're weak, primitive, and alone. But what if a single human warrior walked in with an apex predator that could silence entire worlds? If you enjoy powerful HFY stories like this, make sure to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more epic sci-fi tales every week. Now let's get into it. The Galactic Council chamber glistened under the cold white lights of the orbital citadel. Massive arches of black steel framed its oval hall, within which hundreds of alien delegates shifted on tiered seats that rose like terraces around a central polished obsidian floor. They whispered in dozens of languages, murmurs of clicking mandibles, rasping scales, and droning vocal cords blending into a tide of disdain. General Kale Voss stepped onto that floor, his boots striking the stone with the steady rhythm of a war drum. He was tall for a human, broad-shouldered with a powerful build honed by decades of war and winter hunts. His hair, black streaked with iron gray, was cut short at the sides, revealing the angular planes of a face scarred by claws and blades alike. Across his shoulders lay a drape of white fur that shimmered like fresh polar frost, clasped at the chest by a black alloy torque engraved with Terran runes. At his side padded Azuran. The snow lion dwarfed him by nearly half again in height at the shoulder, its massive paws utterly silent on the stone. Its fur was pure white streaked with faint veins of blue bioluminescence pulsing with each breath. A thick armored ridge of fused bone and alloy plating ran along its chest and shoulders, tapering down its powerful back. Its eyes burned golden under the council lights, pupils narrowing to slits as it scanned the alien ranks. Each movement was deliberate, feline grace underpinned by predatory contempt. A murmur rose, swelling into disbelieving laughter. A dozen counselors from the central dais leaned forward, mandibles clicking in amusement or scaled lips curling back to reveal rows of pointed teeth. Their translation drones buzzed overhead, amplifying their words across the chamber. "Behold, the savage human brings a pet beast to a diplomatic council," croaked Council Leader Exwarath, a towering male reptilian alien with dark green scales banded in gold ceremonial markings. His slitted eyes gleamed with malice as he gestured with a clawed hand toward Kale. "Tell me, Deathworlder, is this your war trophy? Or do you intend to threaten us with an animal instead of words?" The laughter echoed louder, some delegates slapping their seats or waving membrane fingers in mock applause. Two insectoid counselors clacked their mandibles in an expression of gleeful derision. A pale-skinned amphibious male near Exwarath let out a whistling bark, rasping out, "Perhaps he feeds it counselors who offend him." "Careful, Exwarath." Kale did not move. His eyes remained locked on the reptilian leader, the silence of a glacier settling over him. He slowly raised a gloved hand and rested it upon Azuran's thick mane. The snow lion rumbled low in its chest, a sound like distant thunder rolling across frozen plains. Its ears flattened slightly as it scanned each alien, tail flicking once with lazy menace. Exwarath's eyes narrowed. "Your arrogance precedes you, human. You stand here demanding acceptance into the core treaty, yet bring a predator that reeks of primitive dominance rituals. You remain savage, unworthy of civilization's gifts." Kale spoke then, his voice low and clear, resonating from deep within his chest. The Terran accent curled each syllable with cold precision. "My people do not demand acceptance. We come offering alliance. Know this, on my world, predators bow to us. On yours, they flee from you." For a moment, silence reigned, thick and uneasy. Then Exwarath let out a dry, hissing laugh. The council chamber followed suit, echoes of alien laughter filling the domed ceiling and rebounding down upon Kale and Azuran like a rain of mockery. "Threats and riddles?" Exwarath spat. "We should have expected nothing less from a Deathworlder. Guards, remove this beast from the chamber and escort its master back to his shuttle. The core treaty has no place for animals." Two armored alien guards stepped forward, both male reptilian soldiers in gray-blue alloy suits with electropoles crackling faintly at the tips. Their helmets retracted as they approached, revealing scaled heads crowned with short horn ridges. One sneered openly as he swung his pole toward Azuran's flank, daring to prod the massive snow lion. Kale's fingers twitched, brushing Azuran's mane in a subtle command. The snow lion's ears snapped forward, and its lips curled back to reveal dagger-length fangs rimmed in icy mist. It let out a low, vibrating growl that reverberated up through its chest and into the stone floor, rattling the poles in the guard's hands. "Stand down," Kale ordered softly, his eyes never leaving Exwarath's trembling pupils. Azuran stilled, rumble fading to a silent threat as it fixed the guards with a predator's unblinking stare. The guards hesitated, poles wavering, eyes darting to their council leader. Exwirath snorted and waved them off. Enough. Humanity's farce ends here. Return to your ice caves and train your beast. The galaxy is no place for Death World warlords who rely on muscle and fangs over intellect and peace. Kale's gaze remained calm, but his eyes darkened, pupils contracting to pinpricks. Slowly he lowered his hand from Azuran's mane, folding both arms across his chest. His armor creaked softly with the motion, the draped white fur shifting to reveal a triangular insignia of the Sol Dominion military engraved upon his chest plate. He spoke, voice as cold as a dying star. Your mistake, counselor, is believing peace is kept through words alone. On my world, peace exists only because predators respect power. Azuran flicked its tail, claws scraping once against the polished obsidian, leaving deep gouges that glimmered under the lights. A fresh silence fell, heavier than before. The snow lion's golden eyes swept the ranks of alien delegates, each pupil contracting to a thin vertical slit as if memorizing every scent and weakness in the room. Kale shifted his stance slightly, planting his boots wider in a warrior's rest position. He whispered then in an ancient Terran dialect lost to all but the oldest warrior tribes. Azuran's ears twitched at the sound, head lowering until its chin nearly touched the floor, eyes still burning with silent fury. The counselors watched in unsettled quiet. Somewhere high in the observation balconies, a recorder drone hummed as it zoomed in on Kale's scarred face and the snow lion's predatory gaze. The tension coiled so tight it felt like the walls themselves might crack. Then, as though nothing had happened, Exwirath let out a derisive snort, dismissing the moment with a flick of his clawed hand. He turned away, addressing the gathered council with oily confidence. Let us continue to real matters, honored delegates. The savage has no voice here. Kale's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening further under his heavy brow. Azuran exhaled softly, a plume of mist curling up from its nostrils into the chamber's frigid air, shimmering like ghosts before dispersing. As Kale turned and began walking back toward the chamber's arched exit, Azuran fell into silent step beside him, each padded paw leaving prints of frost across the black stone floor. Behind them, laughter rose again, quieter this time, tinged with unease. Kale did not look back. But the echo of Azuran's growl remained long after they vanished beyond the towering gates, vibrating through the bones of every alien present. And though the council resumed its deliberations, none could shake the creeping sense that humanity's visit had not ended with their departure, but only begun. Snow and darkness. That was his first memory of the hunt. Kale's vision blurred as the icy wind sliced across his exposed face, leaving trails of burning cold along the scars already marking his cheekbones. The blizzard howled, screaming through the jagged stone teeth of the frost-spire cliffs that rose around him. He was only 13 then, smaller than the adult warriors who watched from the distant ridge, but his arms and shoulders were already corded with lean muscle built from years of dragging slain ice boars back to camp. His breath fogged the air in ragged bursts. In his left hand he clutched a long-boned spear tipped with sharpened black steel, its shaft wrapped in polar fur to keep his grip from freezing. His right hand pressed against the bleeding gash along his ribs, warmth soaking through his deerskin tunic and seeping into the snow beneath him. 10 meters ahead, half shrouded in the blowing flurries, the snow lion cub crouched behind a broken stone outcrop. Its massive white paws were splayed wide in the powder, claws unsheathed, tail lashing in agitation. Even as a cub it was nearly chest-high to him, its fur puffed out in alarm, blue bioluminescent streaks flickering along its shoulders and cheeks. Its golden eyes burned with pain and fear. A shard of obsidian rock jutted from its rear flank where it had fallen during its desperate flight from the snow wraith pack now circling them. Kale clenched his jaw, tasting blood as another wind gust slapped his face. The wraiths slithered across the snow like sinuous shadows, pale serpentine bodies lined with bone spikes and eyeless skull-like heads that pivoted blindly in the blizzard. Their clicking echoed across the cliffs. They could smell blood. They could sense weakness. One lunged. Kale's body moved before thought could intervene. He drove his spear forward in a sweeping arc, the black steel tip raking across the creature's armored snout with a screech of metal on bone. The wraith recoiled, shrieking, coiling its long body away. The others paused, heads tilting in that eerie alien synchrony, reading his stance, testing his resolve. Behind him, the snow lion cub growled weakly. Its breath came in shallow, pained bursts. Kale glanced back, locking eyes with the creature. Despite its fear, there was no submission in its gaze, only anger and pride. Another wraith lunged, mouth yawning open to reveal concentric rings of fangs. Kale sidestepped, thrusting his spear deep into its throat. The impact jarred his arms to the shoulder, splintering bone and spraying freezing black ichor across his tunic. He ripped the weapon free, pivoting to face the others. They paused again, scenting the death of their kin, tasting uncertainty for the first time. Kale planted his spear but into the snow and raised his free hand toward the cub, palm outward. His voice emerged as a ragged whisper, a prayer carried on frostbitten lips. "Rise." The cub's ears flicked forward, the golden eyes narrowing in focus despite the pain racking its flank. It shifted, muscle by muscle, forcing itself onto 3 paws. Blood dripped steadily from its wound, staining the snow dark crimson. A wraith slithered sideways, sensing weakness, preparing to strike. Kale moved first. He lunged, thrusting his spear at its gaping maw. The wraith coiled aside, jaws snapping shut with a crack like breaking ice, but Kale did not retreat. He drove forward, using his body's momentum to force the spear tip past its bone plates and into the soft underjaw. The creature bucked violently, its death throes throwing Kale sideways into the snow. His vision sparked with white-hot pain as his wounded ribs jarred against packed ice. A roar thundered above him. He rolled onto his back, spear held across his chest in reflex, and saw the cub leap over him, jaws wide, blue bioluminescence blazing along its fur like streaks of lightning in the storm. It landed atop the dying wraith, fangs plunging into its throat with a wet crunch. The creature thrashed once, twice, and fell still beneath the cub's massive paws. The remaining wraiths hissed, slithering back in retreat. They circled just beyond spear range, but the cub roared again, louder this time. The sound cut through the blizzard, echoing across the cliffs and rolling through the snow-swathed trees below. The wraiths recoiled at the apex predator's challenge and vanished into the swirling white gloom. For a moment there was only silence. Kale lay still, gasping for breath, spear trembling in his hands. The cub turned to him, panting heavily, blood dripping from its fangs. Its ears flattened against its skull as it limped forward and sniffed his wounded side. Kale tensed, ready to defend himself if it attacked, but it simply pressed its massive forehead against his chest and rumbled softly. He reached up with shaking fingers and rested them against the creature's fur, feeling the warmth beneath the thick pelt, feeling the pulse of its life thudding in synchrony with his own. That night, when the elders of the Frostspire tribes found him half frozen at the cave entrance, he was leaning against the cub's side, half buried in its thick protective fur. They dragged both boy and beast into the fires of the Great Lodge and saw the blood trails intermingled, human and lion, as one. The following day the eldest shaman declared them bonded. Years later that cub became Azuran, king of the North Range. Kale's memory faded, replaced by the chill silence of his private quarters aboard the Sol Dominion diplomatic shuttle. Outside the narrow viewport stretched the glimmering arcs of the Council Citadel's orbital rings, curving like silver ribs around the pale gas giant below. Inside, Azuran slept on the polished alloy floor beside his bunk, his massive body rising and falling in slow, thunderous breaths. Kale sat on the edge of his bunk, leaning. Kale's eyes remained half-closed as he sat on the edge of the bunk, elbows resting on his knees, fingers steepled in thought. The shuttle's faint hum vibrated through his boots, merging with the rhythm of Azuran's breathing that resonated in the small cabin like distant thunder. Light from the viewport cut across his scarred face, illuminating the furrows of age and war. His gaze flickered to the snow lion resting beside him. Even asleep, Azuran radiated a primal, quiet danger. Each rise and fall of his massive ribcage carried an undercurrent of lethal strength barely leashed beneath his thick, shimmering fur. Kale's wrist communicator vibrated softly. He pressed a finger to it, eyes still fixed on Azuran's sleeping form. "General," came the voice of Colonel Wren, clipped and tense. "Council security scans show armored guards approaching the shuttle hangar. They've issued a recall on your diplomatic clearance. Orders are to escort you under restraint for re-evaluation." Kale's jaw tightened, muscles ticking along his cheek. He lowered his hand and let silence fall for a moment before replying. "Understood." He stood, armor creaking as he rose to his full height. Azuran's golden eyes flicked open instantly, pupils narrowing to slits as they locked onto Kale's face. The snow lion raised its massive head, ears twitching forward, sensing the tension vibrating through its bonded master. Kale placed a heavy hand upon the creature's brow, fingers splaying across the bioluminescent markings. "It's time," he said softly. Azuran rumbled in reply, the sound vibrating the metal deck plates underfoot. With fluid grace that belied his size, the snow lion rose to all fours. His armored plating clinked softly with each subtle movement as he stretched, claws scraping against the polished alloy floor, leaving faint score marks that smoked in the chilled recycled air. Kale buckled his breastplate, tightened his gauntlet seals, and stepped toward the cabin hatch as the shuttle's external klaxon began blaring a proximity alert. Azuran followed, silent as falling snow. The hatch slid open with a hiss, revealing the dimly lit boarding ramp extending into the cavernous hangar bay. Beyond, dozens of Council security soldiers stood in staggered formation, their armor gleaming silver blue under the overhead floodlights. Electropole tips crackled with plasma energy. Heavy pulse carbines were slung across armored chests. All eyes focused on the approaching human and his silent, monstrous companion. At the forefront stood Council leader Exwarath, his scaled lips curled back in what might have been a smile but looked more like a threat. He wore ceremonial combat plating trimmed in polished gold, his clawed fingers flexing around a scepter tipped with a hooked obsidian blade. "General Voss," Exwarath hissed, his voice slithering through the hangar's tense silence. "Under Core Directive 62 Section 8, you are hereby remanded for violation of diplomatic decorum and threat display within Council proceedings. You will surrender your beast and disarm yourself for immediate containment." Kale's gaze drifted over the assembled guards. Their reptilian eyes gleamed with poorly hidden fear as they stared at Azuran, whose massive frame dwarfed them all. The Snow Lion's golden eyes flickered from one soldier to the next, judging, weighing, calculating. Kale spoke, his voice calm and cold. "Leave. Now." A hush fell. Exwarath tilted his head, forked tongue flicking out in amusement. "Leave?" he rasped, his scepter tapping the metal deck with a sharp clink. "You misunderstand, human. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your animal is impressive, yes, but primitive intimidation has no place here. This is the apex of civilization." Kale's eyes darkened, shadows falling across his scarred face. Slowly he raised his hand and made a single curling gesture. Azuran moved. He stepped forward, each massive paw thudding against the deck, claws scraping gouges in the alloy plating. His mane bristled, blue bioluminescent streaks blazing to full intensity, illuminating the hangar in eerie ghost light. His lips peeled back from his dagger-length fangs, steam curling from his black gums as a low, resonant growl rose from deep within his chest. Guards shifted back instinctively, poles wavering, armor clinking as they rebalanced their stance. Exwarath sneered, eyes narrowing in contempt. "Pathetic," he spat. "Kill the beast." Kale did not move. Azuran roared. The sound exploded into the hangar like a thunderclap, vibrating through the deck plates and reverberating up the armored walls. Soldiers staggered, clutching their helmets as their auditory sensors overloaded with shrieking alarms. Some dropped to their knees, weapons clattering to the floor. Exwarath flinched backward, scales rippling down his neck in instinctive terror. Azuran advanced another step, tail lashing in wide arcs that knocked over two crates stacked beside the ramp. His golden eyes burned with savage fury, pupils pinpricks of concentrated rage. He bared his fangs fully, and the growl deepened, vibrating the air itself until it felt like the entire hangar bay was caught in the grip of an avalanche's roar. Kale walked forward, unhurried, armored boots ringing against the metal floor. He passed Azuran's massive shoulder, stepping ahead of his bonded apex predator without fear. He looked up at Exwarath, locking eyes with the trembling council leader. "Understand this truth," Kale said, his voice quiet yet carrying through the hangar like the hiss of a falling blade. "Your apex is built upon illusions of safety, sealed chambers, and orbital weapons platforms. Ours is built upon what we tame, upon what we command, upon what obeys us, because it knows we are the greater predator." Exwarath swallowed, the ridge of scales along his throat pulsing. His eyes flicked to Azuran, then back to Kale. For the first time his voice faltered. You threaten the council?" Kale's gaze remained cold, unblinking. "No," he said. "I remind you." Behind him, Azuran lowered his massive head to hover beside Kale's shoulder, fangs glistening, breath billowing in thick white clouds across the council guards. One guard sobbed softly, dropping his electropole as his scaled hands shook uncontrollably. Kale turned away, his black alloy cloak swirling behind him. Azuran fell into step beside him, the hangar vibrating with each of his footfalls. As they approached the boarding ramp to their shuttle, Kale paused and glanced back over his shoulder. "Inform your council," he said, voice level and deadly calm. "Humanity will not kneel. We will not beg. And we will not be laughed at." Azuran rumbled in agreement, a sound that reverberated in every chest and echoed in every trembling bone. Together they ascended the ramp, disappearing into the shuttle's shadowed interior. The hatch sealed behind them with a final, echoing hiss. In the silence left behind, dozens of guards stood frozen in fear, Xyrath trembling at the realization that the human warlord had not threatened them out of desperation or pride. He had spoken with the quiet certainty of a man who commanded not only his own strength but the savage loyalty of a creature capable of silencing entire worlds. And far above, in the observation towers of the Citadel, unseen counselors whispered among themselves, voices tinged not with scorn but with dawning fear. Kale did not look back as the shuttle engines ignited. He sat upon the armored bench beside Azuran, resting a gloved hand on the Snow Lion's thick mane. The shuttle lifted free of the hangar deck, thrusters humming as it angled toward the darkness beyond. His gaze flickered to the stars and narrowed with quiet resolve. This was far from over. The shuttle streaked away from the Council Citadel, thrusters glowing orange as it cut through the planetary shadow and into open space. Inside, the dim cabin lights flickered across Kale's armored form as he sat unmoving, braced against the gentle hum of acceleration. Azuran lay curled beside him, massive head resting on Kale's boots, golden eyes half-lidded but awake. Every so often, his ears twitched at the shifting vibrations of the hull. Kale watched the stars blur past the narrow viewport, his mind silent. A hollow ache pressed against his chest, not of fear or regret, but of inevitability. He had seen it in their eyes, the terror, the awe, the certainty that humanity would never bow. The galaxy had expected Deathworlders to remain confined within their feral frontiers, easily dismissed as savage anomalies among civilized species. They never understood what it meant to stand before an apex predator and remain unafraid. The communicator at his belt vibrated, drawing him back from his thoughts. He pressed it, voice low. Report. Colonel Wren's tone carried a grim urgency. General, incoming broadcast from the Council. They're demanding immediate diplomatic return for questioning under threat of orbital interdiction. Kale said nothing for a long moment. His gloved fingers curled against Azuran's mane, feeling the warmth and silent power thrumming beneath the thick fur. General? Wren prompted. Inform Fleet Command, Kale replied, his voice cold and resolute. Tell them to initiate Iron Protocol. Full deployment readiness. If the Council attempts interdiction, we will respond. Wren inhaled sharply. Understood, sir. Glory to the North. Kale lowered the communicator, eyes closing as the words settled through him like falling snow. Iron Protocol was no idle threat. It was a declaration that humanity no longer recognized core authority jurisdiction. It meant orbital weapons arrays powering up, war fleets cycling launch codes, surface planetary fortresses transitioning to independent command. It was a death knell to illusions of peace. Azuran rumbled softly, sensing Kale's deepening resolve. The Snow Lion shifted, pressing his massive forehead against Kale's knee. The contact grounded him, memories flickering of hunts across endless polar plains, of quiet nights under silver auroras, of battles fought side by side with silent, absolute trust. The shuttle pilot's voice crackled over internal comms. Approaching fleet rendezvous, General. Visual confirmation on Flagship Winter's Crown. Orders. Kale stood, the full weight of his armor settling around his scarred frame like a mantle of inevitability. Azuran rose beside him, stretching to his full, towering height, blue bioluminescence flickering along his mane and armored shoulders. Kale rested a hand on his flank. Dock with Winter's Crown, he ordered. Initiate command override protocols. I want combat readiness in all squadrons. Aye, sir. As the shuttle banked, Kale moved to the viewport and watched as the massive bulk of Winter's Crown came into view. The sole Dominion flagship floated against the void like a black citadel carved from obsidian and crowned with arrays of kinetic cannons and missile silos. Along its flanks moved escort frigates and destroyers, their engine wakes glittering like cold fireflies in the darkness. Azuran pressed closer, his golden eyes fixed on the gathering fleet. Kale felt the vibration of his growl deep in his bones. For a brief moment, Kale let his hand drift along the Snow Lion's massive neck, feeling the warm pulse of life and loyalty that had anchored him through every battlefield and every frozen hunt. The shuttle docked with a shuddering clang, locking into the flagship's side hangar bay. The cabin hatch slid open, revealing rows of armored Dominion Marines lined up in perfect formation, pulse rifles held across their chests. At their head stood Captain Tyron, a burly man with a scar bisecting his brow and cybernetic implants along his temple. General, Tyron barked, fist slamming against his chest in salute. His eyes flickered to Azuran and his face tightened with respect. Fleet Command awaits your orders on the bridge. Kale stepped forward, Azuran pacing beside him with silent, regal menace. Marines flinched slightly as the snow lion passed, their armor sensors registering his mass and heat signature as a potential armored vehicle rather than a living creature. They reached the lift and ascended in silence. When the doors slid open onto the command bridge, Kale strode out without hesitation. Holographic tactical displays shimmered across the vaulted space, casting shifting blue light across officers and operators at their stations. At the central dais stood Admiral Varen, a gaunt man with white hair cropped close to his skull and eyes as sharp as obsidian. "General Voss," he greeted, voice clipped and controlled. "Council transmissions demand your immediate surrender under threat of orbital strike. Shall we respond with negotiations?" Kale looked at the Admiral, reading the controlled tension in the set of his shoulders, the flicker of restrained anticipation in the bridge crew. He turned his gaze to the tactical overlay hovering above the dais. Red markers showed Council carrier groups vectoring toward their position. Blue icons of Sol Dominion fleets held formation, weapons powered but silent. He spoke quietly. "No negotiations." Varen nodded once, lips thinning into a grim line. "Iron Protocol confirmed." "Orders, sir?" Kale raised his head, eyes narrowing. His voice carried across the silent bridge, each syllable cold as the polar winds of his homeland. "Bring weapon arrays online. Shield formations to intercept positions. Inform the Council that any act of aggression will be met with decisive force." Azuran rumbled beside him, golden eyes glaring at the holographic images of Council ships as though he could see them across the void. His mane bristled, blue glow brightening as the snow lion sensed the tension rippling through every human on the bridge. The Admiral turned to relay orders. Across the Flagship, lights dimmed as combat status was engaged. Klaxons pulsed quietly, rhythmic and resolute, warning crew to brace for imminent action. Kale watched as tactical screens shifted, Dominion squadrons maneuvering into attack vectors while orbital kinetic cannons extended from armored bays along Winter's Crown's flanks. A new transmission flashed across the bridge, projected before Kale's eyes. Council leader Exwarath appeared, his scaled face twisted in a sneer of anger and fear. "Human," Exwarath hissed, voice trembling with suppressed rage, "you will stand down immediately. Your primitive intimidation has no place here. Comply or be annihilated." Kale stepped forward until his shadow fell across the transmission's projection. He leaned in slightly, eyes dark and unblinking, voice low and final. "You threatened extinction upon my people today," he said, each word like a blade sliding from its sheath. "You mocked what you could not control. Now listen well, Counselor. We do not bow to threats. We are the predators of predators. Remember that." Azuran's massive head lowered into view beside Kale, fangs bared in silent snarl. A deep rumble rolled from his chest, vibrating through the bridge until even hardened Marines felt the primal chill of what they were witnessing. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only silence punctuated by the hum of weapons charging. Kale straightened, gaze fixed on the tactical overlays as Council ships continued their approach. Officers glanced at him with a mix of dread and fierce loyalty, knowing full well what his next command would mean. Kale exhaled softly. He placed a hand on Azuran's armored shoulder, feeling the ripple of coiled muscle and killing power beneath his palm. He could almost hear the whisper of winter winds across the frozen plains of his homeland, the scent of pine and blood and ice drifting through memory. "Prepare to fire," he ordered calmly. Azuran rumbled again, deeper this time, a sound of approval and promise. The snow lion's golden eyes glowed with cold light as though reflecting the distant sun's dying rays across an endless field of snow. Across the bridge, final targeting solutions locked in. Energy readings peaked along weapon arrays. Crew braced for the recoil of kinetic salvos. Kale stood tall, scarred face illuminated by tactical displays, eyes unblinking as they stared into the coming storm. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council would see humanity not as primitives to dismiss or predators to cage, but as something far more dangerous. An apex that neither roared nor threatened without purpose. But when it did, galaxies trembled. And in that final silent moment before battle was joined, as Azuran's growl rose to a thunderous promise of blood and Kale's command hand fell to his hip in final readiness, every human aboard Winter's Crown knew this was the hour when legends would be born. Their enemies would call it terror. But for Kale and Azuran, it was simply the hunt.